Alright, what's going on, everybody? My name's Key. This is going to be the first video on my channel. Quick welcome to all of you guys that are watching this video, that are tuned in. Basically, I'm going to be using this channel to document my progress becoming a penetration tester. Currently, I'm a second year student. I'm studying cybersecurity and I have a minor in international relations. I felt that one thing I'm lacking is my technical skills, and I've been getting on Hack the Box this year. I've started the foundations. Right now I'm on tier 1 and I was starting to record. So I recorded the last box that I completed. I screen recorded the whole thing and I'm going to be walking through it with you guys. I'm going to be going through my thought process, everything I've done, also showcasing a tool that I created that runs Nmap scans for me. And yeah, in this box we're going to be going through some remote code execution. We're going to be using a service that is, I guess, still used in the industry by Amazon. We'll just get into it as we go through the box. But I'm going to be walking through it, talking through it, and yeah. Okay, so I'm about to show you guys how to first connect to the Hack the Box machine. So you have to use OpenVPN and download one of the VPN servers. So for the starting point machines, you're going to need to use the starting point VPN configuration. So I'm here showing you how I connected to it. You have to sudo. So basically use administrator privileges to actually connect to the VPN. Or if you do it without the administrator privileges, you will not be able to run that command. So make sure you always sudo when you run it. So now we have the IP address. And the first task is how many TC ports are open. Okay, so we're going to run an Nmap scan on this service. I'm about to open another terminal instance. And I'm about to show you this tool that I created. It's basically called Quickscan. It uses Nmap and it uses subprocess to import commands to the terminal OS and basically just run those default Nmap scripts for the service and also a full port scan. It's aggressive full port scan. So import your target, choose one for the service scan or two. I always run the port scan first because I just want to know how many ports are actually open on the service. So this scan will literally run all the ports and at a pretty aggressive rate, so it's not too fast or not too slow. It'll be kind of quick. We'll see how long it takes here. Okay, and so now the port scan is done, and we have two services. We have port 222 and we have port 80, an SSH and HTTP server. So now I'm gonna run a service scan onto this port. First, we're gonna answer this. There's two ports open. Um, so that's our first task done. And now it's asking, what is the domain of the email address provided in the contact section of the website? Okay, so I mean, we already know it's the HTTP server. So we're gonna have to access this IP by adding HTTP to the beginning and then seeing what happens. So let's just go back to the site and let's just search around and see. It's looking like it's for some band and they're like selling tickets for their tour. Pretty interesting. There might be a few vulnerabilities. Could be like a SQL injection somewhere, or I don't know. We'll have to see. But I found my first flat or my next task, and got the email the toppers.hackthebox. That's our domain. And now let's just look at this site. Let's just see what's around. Let's just click each page. This band tab just brings you to the band like part of the page. All right, so basically just brings you to, it scrolls you down the page. The part for the tickets. When you click help, it shows a little hashtag there. Maybe you could I don't know, run some code through there. I don't know, access things through that. But just try and input some things. See what happens when I click pay. Nothing happens. I feel like it might send an email to you. I'm not sure. Um, Not really much else going on the website though. Alright, so our next task is asking us what Linux file can we use to resolve host names to IP addresses in order to be able to access the websites that point to the host names. So that's going to be your slash etc folder, and you're going to have a host file inside of there which has all the IP addresses mapped to host names. But right now our next task is to find a subdomain. after further enumeration. So I know of a tool, Gobuster. You can use that for either web directory brute forcing or also subdomain brute forcing. So I'm going to try and figure out what type of commands I can use for a subdomain. I've never actually done a subdomain brute force with Gobuster, so this was my first time, and I ended up using DeepSeek here to help me understand what commands I should use, as well as also TLDR. It's a pretty good command line tool that you can use. It gives you some quick shortcuts, easy commands to use with whatever tool that you're trying to either enumerate or exploit with. So here I was trying to see if my tool could take actual text characters. So like if I inputted a domain, would the actual scan work? And in the meantime, it took a while, so I was gonna just do an actual Nmap scan um, without using my code and see if that'll run. I think I'll have to edit my code and just make it accept text characters, or it might just not be able to accept domains. I don't know. We'll figure that out though. Okay, so my Nmap version scan is complete, and the only extra information I have is some SSH host keys. But now I'm about to just TLDR GoBuster and just see what I can use to discover subdomains. And we have a DNS query. Just input my domain and then a word list. So I'm gonna add the toppers.hackthebox domain after the -d, and then I'm gonna use a word list. And at first I was thinking about using RockU, but I'm about to actually Google this and see what word list I should use for subdomain brute forcing. I know there's very many word lists out there, and if anyone has any that they could recommend to me to use, I'm just using the default ones that are installed on Kali. If there are any word lists you know that I could use, please let me know in the comments. So I did a little more research, but then I decided to just use the word list I already had installed, and it was not working. It kept saying I had a parse error, so I was trying to figure out what's going on. I was very unsure why this command didn't work. I thought I did it properly, and later on, I realized that I'm actually supposed to use the virtual host command, which is literally right in front of me, because this server, well, I'm directed to it through a VPN, and I believe that since it's not open to the public internet, I don't think I'll be able to access it without adding that vhost query. I think DNS, if it was like an open DNS server like, Google, or let's say like Uber Eats, I'll probably be able to run that command, but because it is a local server, I'm gonna have to use that virtual host. When you use AI to help you on your penetration tests, it's not always going to give you the exact answer. Like here we see it tells me the same DNS query. It doesn't understand the exact situation, right? So you also have to understand a bit of what's happening and just play around with things and just be patient. Obviously, I'm just running this by myself. I don't have anyone in my ear. And just being patient and trying things is definitely going to help you and will take you a long way, I feel like. Okay, so now I'm about to run this Gobuster command, and I'm about to use that virtual host query. This time I'm gonna have to use a -u for the URL, and we're gonna be using the toppers.hackthebox URL, and then I'm gonna also use that word list that I downloaded from the sec files, and we will see what type of subdomains we can pull up with this tool. So I ran the Gobuster command and it worked, but it didn't give me the results I needed. I had to add -append domains to the end of the command so that I was able to actually go through the word list and add on those words to the domain and find some directories that we can attack. So we ended up getting two directories from our brute force, and I'm gonna try both of them. The first one, that GC one, didn't work, but the S3 one, I tried to add it in, and it was the correct task. Alright, so the next task asks, what service is running on the discovered subdomain? And it's giving me a hint to just do a Google search. So I'm about to speed up this next clip, and it's just me doing a search and also running that subdomain actually in another tab. I tried to connect, but it didn't work. So the service running is Amazon S3, and this is used for data backups and archives. So I'm assuming that we're going to find some information inside the service that can get us our root flag. Okay, so the next task is asking what command line utility can we use to interact with the service running on the discovered subdomain. So I'm just gonna add in the AWS S3 service when I do my DeepSeek search. And yeah, it's giving me some information here, and I'm seeing that I try to just TLDR the AWS and I had that installed as well, but I see it's the AWS CLI, that's what it's called. And so I'm gonna add that and we get that next task done. Alright, so the next task is asking what command is used to set up the AWS CLI installation. So let me just check what type of hint that it's gonna even tell me. Because I checked the terminal and I couldn't really see anything. So whoever wants me to do this box is saying to use the AWS CLI documentation. So I'm about to speed through me going through the documentation, trying to figure out what am I supposed to use to configure the AWS client. After some time and doing a DeepSeek search, I was able to figure out the task. So the task is going to be AWS configure, and that's how we're going to set up our CLI and be able to access whatever service, so the S3 service in this case. So here I'm using AWS configure to set up some local credentials so I can actually use the AWS service S3. And basically I can just put in like test. I asked DeepSeek how to configure, so it's basically telling me I can just put in some like test values and it'll just still configure me. And from this point onwards, I'll be able to actually use the S3 service through the AWS CLI. So if you type AWS configure list, it can also show you a list of the credentials that you have. So mine, I can see I set mine up. So I can officially use the S3 service now. And the next task is asking me what command is used by the above utility to list all of the S3 buckets. So I'm about to also just do another DeepSeek search and just see what exactly I can use. Um, as well as just check through the documentation. I'm not just going to keep using AI to do everything for me. After some research, I was able to find that it's going to be the AWS S3 LS command, and that's going to list all the documents inside the bucket. And it's similar to like your normal terminal where you use cd ls. So the next task is asking what scripting language is a server written in. So I'm just going to do some more research to figure out how I can find out this information. I thought it might be in the AWS CLI documentation, but I could not find any information. And then I was able to realize I could actually just list all the buckets. I should just use that command. And after that, I was able to figure out what buckets are there, and I see a .php file. So I was having trouble using this ls command to actually see the objects inside of the bucket. And part of this was because I was either A, putting the wrong bucket address, or B, I didn't add the no sign request either. So I tried a lot of different commands. I kept looking on DeepSeek, and I was finally able to realize, well, I figured out what box I was doing. So it showed me that I should use the S3 API instead and just add that list-objects-v2 query as well. And then it should be able to just list all of them for me. And after running this command, I was able to see all the objects in the bucket, and I could see that .php file that I was talking about earlier. So now we know our final task is going to be PHP, and now all we have to do is find our root flag. So this is where we're going to do our final exploitation. And at first I thought that this value that I highlighted here was actually a password hash. So I was thinking, okay, either this is my flag or I'm gonna have to like dehash this somehow. So I spent a lot of time using like hashcat. I tried to use John the Ripper, but literally nothing was working. And I realized that even though it was in the MD5 format, this was not actually a password hash. And this was a moment where I was getting low-key a little frustrated because I spent a lot of time just trying to figure out if this was a hash and it just was not like decoding. And I guess this is just part of like the process. You're gonna have to just go through times where things just do not work. Here I actually tried to access that dash index.php web page, and I was able to get a connection when I added the S3. At this point, I did some more research. After some research, I found that I could do some remote code execution. So the plan was to upload a malicious PHP file onto the bucket, and then from that bucket, I would access that URL and use the web server to execute it. So I was able to use that system get command, and I'd be able to use the terminal on that web server and access its file directory. So after doing some research on DeepSeek, it figured out what box I was doing, and it was telling me I'm going to need to upload a PHP shell to get a reverse shell. Alright, so I'm going to break down this PHP code. So basically how it works is it's a web shell that's going to execute some operating system commands through the web request. So it's going to be doing this through the URL. And in this code, when I put system and then I have this code that says like get command inside the parentheses, this system call is going to execute a command onto the server's OS. So it's going to be like going onto terminal, and I can do like ls, I can do who am I, and it will execute and print out what will output onto the terminal. The next part we have is the cache sign underscore get, and in brackets we have a CMD in quotes. And this part of the code is just going to read the parameters from my URL query string, and it's basically just going to get whatever command that we put at the end of our URL. So if I put ID, it will get ID as our command. So here I follow DeepSeek steps to use that cp command to copy this file into the bucket. But first I just want to actually look up the cp functionality on the AWS client, and it is the same as like using your local file system on terminal. So I went ahead and copied this shell.php file into the bucket, and from that point I was able to actually access this shell.php through the s3.thetoppers.hackthebox subdomain, and I could actually run commands through the URL and then search for the flag. Once I was able to ensure that the shell was copied into the bucket, I had to first make sure that the IP address was actually linked to the subdomain, so that whenever I ran these commands through my terminal, because I was going to start curling the actual URL and adding my commands at the end of the URL. So once I confirmed that, I was able to use curl to basically enumerate through the file system and find the flag. So the rest of this video is me using curl to run these commands through the URL. Unfortunately, I did use a bit of the AI to figure out where exactly the flag was in the directory. But in the next box I plan to use less of that, and hopefully things go really smooth. Let me know if you have any suggestions on what I should do for the next video. I'm planning to just screen record another box I do in the tier 2 and do something similar where I just explain my thought process and how I did my enumeration and exploitation. If you do enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. Hopefully this video was able to be entertaining or at least help you learn something. If you did like it, just make sure to leave a like, and thank you for watching this video.